My heart nearly stopped when I saw the bank alert flash on my phone, a series of unauthorized charges that told me everything. My husband had stolen my credit card information and was spending lavishly in Europe. I felt a surge of shock and betrayal so intense it blurred my vision. Every dream I'd ever had of trust and partnership crumbled in an instant as I realized the man I loved had not only deceived me, but was now living a life of extravagance on my dime. But he missed one key thing: he left a digital breadcrumb trail he never imagined would lead me right to him. I remember the early days of our marriage as if they were painted in warm hues, a time when trust was the very foundation of our love. We had met at a small community college, both working part-time jobs and sharing dreams over cheap coffee. I was drawn to his easy smile and confident air. He made me believe that together we could conquer the world. When we married, I was filled with hope and excitement, believing that every challenge we faced would only bind us closer. I trusted him implicitly, even when he'd occasionally come home late with vague explanations of networking events or client meetings. I dismissed those moments as the inevitable growing pains of a man chasing his ambitions. As the years passed, however, subtle discrepancies began to surface. He started to insist on managing our finances with a business-like approach, setting up joint accounts and requesting that I let him handle all credit transactions. I trusted him. After all, we were partners and I believed that transparency would be our shield. Little did I know that behind his reassurances lurked a cunning plan. One evening while I was out with a friend, I received an alert on my phone. It was a notification from my bank, an unusual purchase, an expensive hotel booking in Paris, followed by multiple high-end restaurant charges in Milan and Barcelona. At first I thought it was a mistake, a glitch in the system perhaps, but as more alerts piled in, the cold truth dawned on me. In a state of shock, I raced home and began scouring my bank statements, piecing together a timeline of unauthorized charges. Every detail confirmed my worst fear. My husband had stolen my credit card information and was using it to finance a luxurious European getaway. I felt a blend of rage, humiliation, and heartbreak. How could he do this? The betrayal was absolute, a secret he'd hidden behind my back while I believed we were building a life of honesty and mutual respect. That night I confronted him. I found him sitting on the living room couch, scrolling on his phone as if nothing were amiss. "How could you?" I demanded, voice trembling with anger and hurt. He glanced up, his eyes cold and distant, and simply said, "It's done." Without a further word, he left the house, his departure as silent as it was final. I was left in a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sorrow, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal that cut deeper than any physical pain. The next morning, as I sat at our kitchen table with a cup of bitter coffee, I resolved to take action. I couldn't allow his deceit to go unanswered. I had already begun tracing the digital breadcrumbs he'd unwittingly left behind. Every transaction, every charge, was time-stamped and geotagged with details that I could use to track his itinerary. I logged into my online banking account repeatedly, noting down hotel names, flight numbers, and even the credit card's merchant codes. It was meticulous work, each detail a piece of the puzzle that revealed his route across Europe. With this information, I discovered that he was currently staying at a 5-star hotel in Paris, a place I had dreamed of visiting for years, now turned into a stage for his betrayal. Determined not to let his treachery break me, I reached out to a close friend who worked in cybersecurity. She helped me trace the digital footprints left by his transactions, confirming that he had indeed hacked into my account, using my credit card information without my permission, and that he had done so deliberately. Her analysis was damning and left little room for doubt. This was not an accidental error but a calculated theft. My friend's support gave me the courage to plan my next steps. I decided I wasn't going to sit by and allow him to enjoy his luxury at my expense. I would confront him, expose his betrayal, and reclaim my dignity. In the following days, I made arrangements to travel to Paris. The thought of going to the city where he was living it up in opulence filled me with a mix of dread and determination. I booked a flight on a modest airline, not to match his extravagance, but to ensure I could confront him face to face. Every moment of planning, every ticket purchased, was a step toward reclaiming what was stolen from me: my trust, my pride, my sense of self. I reached out to my bank and reported the fraud, ensuring that all further transactions from my account were blocked. Their reassurances were cold comfort as I processed the extent of the betrayal. Before my departure, I sat down and wrote a letter to him, a raw, honest account of my feelings, of the hurt his actions had caused. I didn't send it immediately, but I kept it as a cathartic reminder of my determination to stand up for myself. The letter read like a tapestry of memories and pain, a tribute to the love we once shared, now stained by deceit. The flight to Paris was long and filled with anxious anticipation. I spent the hours reading over my evidence, reviewing the timestamps and locations of his transactions, and mentally preparing for the confrontation that awaited me. As the plane touched down, a mix of relief and apprehension washed over me. I knew that facing him would not undo the past, but it might force him to confront the consequences of his actions. The city of Paris, with its blend of romance and grit, became the backdrop for a showdown I had never imagined I would experience. Once I arrived at the hotel where he was staying, I took a deep breath and checked in under a pseudonym. I needed to observe him to see if the man I thought I knew was still there, or if he had changed completely in the face of his betrayal. I spent the first day wandering the elegant streets of Paris, visiting cafes, and discreetly checking the locations of his transactions on my phone. Every detail confirmed my suspicions. He was living a life of luxury, indulging in fine dining and lavish experiences that I had once dreamed of sharing with him. Each revelation stoked the flames of my resolve, transforming my heartbreak into a cold, calculated determination for retribution. That evening, I arranged to meet a mutual friend, someone who, despite our complicated history, had remained neutral, at a quiet bistro near the hotel. Over a glass of wine, I confronted her with the evidence I had gathered. "He's not the man I thought he was," I confessed, voice low and measured. "I trusted him with everything, and he betrayed me in the most calculated way." She listened, nodding sympathetically, and urged me to confront him directly. "You deserve to know the truth, and you deserve an apology," she said softly. Her words, though gentle, resonated deeply, pushing me to take the next step. I decided to request a meeting with him. I called the hotel's front desk and arranged to meet him in the lobby the following morning. The next day, I waited in the quiet elegance of the hotel lobby, the early light filtering through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the marble floor. Every minute felt like an eternity. Finally I saw him, Michael, as he insisted on being called now, in a tailored suit, casually checking his phone near the concierge desk. He looked up, his expression unreadable as our eyes met. "Hello," I said, forcing a calm tone that belied the storm inside me. He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Hello," he replied, his voice flat. I took a deep breath and began, "I know about everything, the stolen credit card info, the lavish charges, the hotel bookings across Europe." His face betrayed a flicker of surprise, quickly masked by cool indifference. "I have all the evidence," I continued, sliding my phone across the counter so he could see the screenshots and transaction details. His hand reached out, but I pulled it back, my voice steady. "You thought you could run away with my trust, with my financial security, but you missed one key thing. I've been watching and I'm taking back what is mine." The words hung in the air as he stared at the phone, and for a moment, I saw vulnerability flash in his eyes. "Look, I can explain," he stammered, his tone faltering. I shook my head. "There is nothing to explain. Your actions speak for themselves." I felt a surge of power, a quiet vindication rising from the depths of my heartbreak. I told him I was returning home, that our marriage was over, and that I would be filing charges for fraud. I left the lobby without another word, leaving him alone with the evidence of his betrayal. The confrontation in the lobby quickly became the talk among those few who had witnessed it. I received messages from my lawyer, Ms. Daniels, congratulating me on taking a stand. She assured me that the legal system would help me reclaim what was stolen, my financial security, my dignity, and perhaps even a measure of justice for our broken marriage. I could almost hear the murmurs of support from friends back home, even as I navigated the cold streets of Paris. Over the next several weeks, I worked with my lawyer to file the necessary reports, freeze the remaining transactions, and pursue legal action against Michael for the unauthorized use of my credit card information. The process was grueling and technical, an endless cycle of phone calls, document reviews, and court appearances that left me emotionally drained yet increasingly empowered. I discovered that he had transferred millions to offshore accounts and that his new lifestyle was financed by the very funds I had painstakingly saved to clear his debt. Every piece of evidence reinforced the betrayal, but it also galvanized me. I began to see the legal battle not just as a means to reclaim my money, but as a way to assert my self-worth in the face of his callous disregard. As the case unfolded, the media caught wind of the scandal. A husband who had abandoned his wife via text, secretly draining their joint finances to fund a luxury getaway in Europe. Headlines painted him as a heartless opportunist, and I found unexpected solidarity in the support that poured in from strangers. Emails and messages of encouragement flooded my inbox, each one a small salve for the raw wound of betrayal. I even received invitations to speak at local events about financial abuse and infidelity, and while the idea of sharing my story publicly was daunting, it also felt like a way to transform my pain into purpose. Meanwhile, my personal life began to take on a new rhythm. I withdrew from the joint accounts completely and opened my own savings account with a secure bank that promised robust fraud protection. I restructured my finances, determined to never again be vulnerable to someone I trusted implicitly. I also enrolled in a financial literacy course, wanting to empower myself with knowledge so that I could rebuild my future on a solid foundation. Each step, no matter how small, felt like reclaiming a piece of the life that had been stolen from me. There were moments of deep reflection, long nights when I would sit by my window, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, and wonder how everything had gone so wrong. I recalled the early days of our marriage, the gentle optimism that had once filled our home, and compared it to the cold, calculating betrayal that now defined our relationship. I asked myself what I could have done differently if I had ignored the warning signs of secrecy and late-night phone calls. But deep down, I knew that trust, once shattered, was not something that could be mended with mere apologies or half-hearted promises. It required a fundamental change, a complete reordering of priorities and values. As my legal proceedings progressed, I found strength in unexpected places. I reconnected with my old college friends, who reminded me of the independent, determined woman I once was. I began to write, a blog detailing my journey from betrayal to empowerment, each word a cathartic release of the emotions that had built up inside me. Readers from around the country reached out with their own stories of infidelity, financial abuse, and personal recovery. Their messages, raw and honest, reminded me that I was not alone in my struggle. Through my writing, I found a community, a shared understanding that helped me heal. The courtroom battles were long and arduous. Michael's lawyer tried desperately to downplay the evidence, arguing that his client had acted in good faith and that the charges were merely a misunderstanding. But every time I presented a bank statement, every time a witness testified to the unauthorized transactions, the truth became more undeniable. The judge, a stern woman with years of experience, finally ruled in my favor, ordering that Michael be held accountable for the stolen funds and for the breach of trust that had devastated our marriage. The verdict, though a legal victory, did little to erase the personal loss I felt. I had not only lost a partner but also the vision of a shared future that had once seemed so promising. The aftermath of the trial was a time of bittersweet recovery. Michael's new life, built on the ill-gotten gains from my credit card theft, began to unravel as investigations into his offshore accounts and dubious investments took their toll. I heard whispers that he was facing mounting legal challenges and that his reputation in the business community was in tatters. While a part of me felt a pang of satisfaction at his downfall, I also realized that my true victory was not in his punishment, but in my own ability to rise above the betrayal. In the months that followed, I slowly rebuilt my life piece by piece. I moved back to my hometown to a small apartment that I could call my own, a sanctuary where I could heal and start afresh. I reconnected with family members who had stood by me during the darkest days, and I forged new relationships with friends who valued honesty and integrity above all else. I continued to write about my journey, my story resonating with others who had experienced similar betrayals. Each blog post, each shared conversation, became a stepping stone toward reclaiming my identity and my power. I also rededicated myself to my career as a graphic designer, taking on freelance projects that allowed me to express my creativity and assert my independence. With every new project, I felt a sense of liberation, a reminder that I was capable of building a future that was entirely my own, untainted by the cruelty of those who had once betrayed me. I invested in furthering my education, attending workshops and conferences that expanded my skills and opened doors to new opportunities. Slowly but surely, the scars of betrayal began to fade, replaced by the quiet strength of resilience. Throughout this tumultuous journey, I never lost sight of the lesson that Michael's actions had forced upon me, that trust is sacred and once broken, it demands an unyielding commitment to rebuild or to move on. I learned that while forgiveness is a noble goal, it should never come at the expense of one's self-worth. I discovered that my value was not determined by the actions of a deceitful partner, but by the strength and courage with which I faced adversity. I continued to document my progress, not just in legal victories and career milestones, but in the small, everyday moments of healing. I celebrated each step forward. The first time I smiled genuinely in months, the day I signed a lease for my new apartment, the moments spent with friends who reminded me that love could be pure and uplifting. I began to see that my future was not defined by the betrayal I had endured, but by the choices I made each day to reclaim my life and my happiness. As the legal battles eventually came to a close, with Michael facing ongoing financial and legal repercussions, I felt a profound sense of closure. The court's decision had not only restored my financial stability but had also validated the emotional toll that his betrayal had taken on me. It was a bittersweet victory, one that reminded me that justice, though slow, could prevail even in the face of deep personal wounds. Looking back on that fateful day, the day I received his cold text message, the moment I discovered the depth of his betrayal, I realized that I have grown immeasurably. I have learned that resilience is not the absence of pain, but the ability to move forward despite it. I have learned that true empowerment comes from within, from the courage to stand up for oneself when all seems lost. And while I will always carry the scars of that betrayal, I now wear them as symbols of the strength I have discovered along the way. Today, as I sit in the comfort of my own space, surrounded by reminders of the journey I've taken, I feel a quiet pride in the woman I have become. I have reclaimed my narrative, rebuilt my life, and ensured that my future is defined not by the mistakes of the past, but by the limitless possibilities of what lies ahead. Michael's betrayal may have torn apart our marriage and stripped me of my financial security for a time, but it also ignited a fire within me, a fire that has fueled my transformation from a heartbroken, betrayed wife into a strong, independent woman ready to embrace a future filled with promise. My story is not just one of betrayal and loss, it is also a story of redemption, resilience, and the power of reclaiming one's own destiny. I have learned that the path to healing is paved with both tears and triumphs, and that every setback can be a stepping stone toward a brighter, more authentic future. I now know that true happiness comes from within, from the unwavering belief in one's own worth, and from the determination to rise again even when life seems to have taken everything away. As I close this chapter and look forward to writing new ones, I carry with me the lessons of the past, the importance of trust, the need for honesty, and the realization that no one can ever truly steal your power unless you let them. Michael may have tried to destroy me with his callous text and his reckless actions, but in the end he only set the stage for my own incredible comeback. And that, above all, is the victory that I will cherish for the rest of my life.